We're here at the 2019 Muscle Car and Corvette Nationals. This year the red carpet display is a Ford Total Performance display, and we've got a number of Boss 429s. I think got every color almost. And so on the other side over here we have some Cougars and a Torino, and it's nice to see Ford highlighted out here this year, where we've brought out this 1969 Boss 429 Mustang, KK number 1213. It's the earliest known Boss 429 that had a Boss 429 engine installed in it. So they started out at 1201, and this is 1213. And all those other cars either don't exist or didn't have a Boss 429 engine installed in them.
The 429s had what they called Carcraft numbers, and this is Carcraft number 1213. 1213 was a pre-production car that was two before the first street car, which was KK 1215, and this is a special car because it is a pre-production car. It's the earliest known to exist that was a complete car. Recently, KK 1201 was discovered, but it was an engineering car that really didn't have, as far as we know, any Boss 429 modifications done to it.
Which is first, the KK number or the serial number? You know, the car was built on the Dearborn assembly line, serial number wide. When it went to Carcraft, the Carcraft number was put in when it was finished, went out the door. The problem is they didn't keep them in line and track. And there was 20 of each colors done first, and the first 20 black cars were the first cars done. Well, this is the first earliest one we know of, KK number wise and serial number wise. It's a 15, all the early cars were 150 serial numbers in the group.
These cars were originally installed with a 428 Super Cobra Jet engine, and that was just in the very beginning. And it was taking too long to get through the process, so they started sending them without engines.
The Ford executives all came out to study and said, we've never done this before, we're going to ship bodies to you, rollers without engine transmissions later on, and then they just put the Boss 9s in because they had these Super Cobra Jet engines at the Carcraft plant, which is right in Michigan, an hour away from Detroit, and they had them engines out there. What are you going to do with them, you know? So they decided to start changing it. So this has a different DSO number. They're 89-2000s, and there's 20 of each color, the early car. And some of the unique features on it was you have to, when he restored it, I told him you have to pretend it had a Super Cobra Jet engine in it and take it back out and then put the Boss 429 in.
Actually, the car is redesigned from the firewall forward. It's unique from the firewall forward. That included the shock towers, the hood, the fenders were rolled, and it wasn't just an easy roll. They actually put a metal rod in there and made them super tight. And the only way they could do that without distorting everything was to put the rod in there. And a lot of people believe that Carcraft actually modified the front ends on the cars, but actually this was done at the assembly plant. The shock towers were installed. They're unique, but they were installed just like a 428 Cobra Jet shock tower is different than a regular Mustang. All this was welded together and assembled as each side was a left and a right and a core support. So it's not like the guys at Carcraft started cutting and welding and modifying the shock towers. These were all stamped steel units that were actually sold separately as a replacement if you had collision damage.
I documented 25 things done differently on these early cars. I'm studying them over the years. And it's like, the battery was put in the trunk, and the 420 Super Cobra, they had a battery up front.
Okay.
And so there's witness marks in the circles where they took the battery tray off. And on the back of the firewall was a hole in there. 420 Super Cobra Jet had iron heads. They grounded it to the firewall. These has aluminum heads. So they had to ground a block to the frame rail up here. So they grounded it differently up. And they also had a battery heat shield on the Super Cobra Jets on the starter motor. So they took that off, and you'll see where the firewall, the insulation was sprayed there. Well, it's not there. They took it off, but the witness there with the marks was there yet. They had to take it off because you can't get the head to clear in there. Most of them are minor things, but you have to pretend it had a Super Cobra Jet in when you restore it. They had them lift hooks front and back and had a jig so they could drop it all, and they dropped it all in with the transmission all attached one time in a pit. They had a pit at Carcraft so they could go down in there. There was a guy down in the pit so they could get it all done at one time.
So when we got this car, which was I think January of this year, it was done up like the race car it had always been. So right shortly after it was produced, it became a race car, stayed that way all of its life until just earlier this year.
And because this was a race car all of its life, it had the standard interior in it because it was lighter. See, when the 1213 was delivered from Carcraft to the Ford X Garage, that's where Dave Lyle picked it up, and it was what they referred to at Ford Motor Company, a dollar car. They would sell the car to Dave Lyle for $1, and he signed a contract, and then that released them from liability on the car. But they had ownership, and then when they were done using the car, they were supposed to sell it back to Ford for $1. And then a lot of times they would make a deal where they would keep the car and then Ford would give them the title. So it was kind of a neat program, that what they refer to as a dollar car program. I saw in Ohio when previous owner Gary Horton, who had it many years, was still racing it at the Columbus weekend, and he was running the car pretty hard yet back in the 90s. And everybody knew what it was. It was probably a lot faster when it was originally a super stock car when Dave Lyle had it. But when Dave Lyle had it, it was the first of the Ford BOSS 429s that broke the 10-second barrier.
My client wanted to bring it back to, as-built condition. So we took, a race car basically and converted it back into an original restored car. So in doing a car like this, we have done several Fords and GMs and Mopars and whatnot, but a BOSS 429 is really unlike any other kind of car. There's just so much to know, and the experts, the two of them that I worked with, Ed Meyer and Bob Perkins, were both wonderfully helpful. Photographs, descriptions, answering phone calls. You really couldn't jump into one of these cars and turn it around in 11 months and have it be really all that great at all without the help of those experts.
Gary from Level 1, he came to the shop and looked at parts, and I have a couple of unrestored cars that he took pictures of that were real low numbered cars, because mine's only 2 away, 12, 15, and we went over some of the things that were unique to the very early cars, and we just communicated a lot on the phone. But I mean, Level 1 did all the work. I mean, they did a great job on the car, and we tried to help on some of the smaller details and some parts, but Level 1 did the restoration.
I've helped Gary on several BOSS 9s because he's more of a GM shop, and I go to Colorado, Denver area, and my wife's sister lives out there, and we go out there to visit, and I go work on the car at the shop because it's just right down the road.
The toughest hurdle on any BOSS 429 is just the amount of parts and the rarity of them and the cost of them. And so really acquiring the parts was a big hurdle. The car was in pretty good condition, but we ended up buying a whole entire 69 BOSS 429 Mustang to use as a parts car, which is pretty unprecedented to use one of those cars as a parts car, but we needed what we figured was enough parts to justify the cost. On this car here, the intake, it's aluminum and it's an engineering piece. They're all aluminum, but this one we left unpainted, and that shows that it's aluminum. And so we decided not to paint it. There is another car that they photographed that was a prototype, and it did not have a painted intake manifold. This intake, when it was acquired, had never been painted blue, so we elected to leave it natural aluminum. And no one really knows for sure, but it seems to be that maybe some of these prototype cars didn't get the intake painted.
Another special feature is the master cylinder and the booster. The booster is a different design. It's shorter and taller. They couldn't get the other ones to fit, clear the heads up there. There's an aluminum wedge adapter on the back side of that that brings it up like this so it can clear the valve covers. This is also the first car to use F60 tires. The new wide, low-profile tires are coming out because everybody was wanting bigger, wider tire. And this also first to use 15-inch wheels. But the wheels are not Ford wheels, they're Magna 500. This is something unique too. This car was hand stamped up here, the serial numbers.
Is that right?
up here. All other cars, they're up in here. But the original cars is here, but they couldn't get into the machine to stamp it because of this outer railing up there. So apparently they started out stamping by hand. Then later on, Ford, they started putting the stamp up there. And the reason it's got two horns over here is because oil coolers, so they had to move one horn over and they had to have a jumper wire to jump it across up there. And they had a grounding strap on the backside to support that. And the reason the hood, everybody understand, is it's a tall hood scoop. They were going to be using Mercury Cougar scoop, but it's smaller. They had to have it taller because if you look across here, the way this engine was designed, it was too tall when you fit it. If you close the hood, the air cleaner actually sticks up through the hole. So that's why they made that taller scoop to get it to work up there with ram air. And there are cables in there. One has A for air and the other one is for choke, because the BOSS lines had manual choke on them. Another thing about these cars that are unique is they have a special rear sway bar. It's the first American car to use a rear sway bar system because of the heavy motor up front. And it has an under axle sway bar. It's underneath the axle. It's the first car to ever use a rear sway bar system that are made up on it. So that's another unique feature.
I would say another really nice thing about getting a parts car for this car was getting a complete interior. So it's really difficult to get. The door panels are really tough to get. The seats with the Comfort Weave interior, and even a dash pad, because there's subtle differences, and these judges and the experts in the Mustang field really can spot, instantly spot reproduction parts. So it was really key on a car this historically important to have really the best parts and pieces.
Everybody always says, a black 429 is like the most desirable color. It's the rarest color, and everybody that's owned the car since Dave Lyle has always had the inkling to say, what would that car be if we put it back stock? And then when the original motor was found, the block, that's very important on these things, and it still has the original transmission with the car. So there was enough stuff there to put it back to make it a concours correct car. But originally the race history was hard to get over, so it's just cool both ways, and to think that the investment that was made to buy another car to get some of the standard BOSS stuff like the seats and the interior back into it, they did it the right way. You couldn't do it more correctly. I think it's probably just a matter of opinion, but to have the earliest known black BOSS 429 is pretty cool, and it's a pre-production car. Whether it's a Mustang or a Hemi Cuda, if you've got the first one or the last one, that's always significant. And I just think it's good for the hobby, that the interest it's created. Either way, it's probably got to be one of the most, if not the most significant BOSS 420 Mustang that still exists. So
we're gonna continue to tweak it a little bit after judging here. We'll see what the judges have to say. We'll bring it up even a little bit better, and hopefully we can get it out and show it at some of the other Mustang events around the country.